So in last video we talked about XML general entity and parameter entities, and in this one we are talking about XXE exploits. So let's say once the hacker know there is some kind of uh, what are the consequences of the XXE attack? So first of all, confidentiality, that they can access any important file from the system. Integrity, they can exploit the trusted entity. For example, the issue is in the backend server, and obviously backend server. Let's say if it's a trusted entity, meaning that they can access further machines which are not accessible by from the front end, but due to this exploit that they can make HTTP calls to those machines. Availability, they can create a XXE exploit in which they end up like they can create exploit in such a way that will basically maybe return a big file or end up using excessive CPU on the system and ultimately crash the server. So the first one we talked about the retrieving important files. So when we talk about the retrieving important files, it's like they can access. First of all, we need to understand whether there is XXE problem there is or not, right? And then we can access any important file, and if they're reflecting as well. So in the first case, we are assuming that they'll be reflecting some values. So what we have done, I'll just talk about directly about the XXE exploit, the payload in which we are saying we have created a general entity named XXE. System is a keyword just to by which we can mention URI to a file or any HTTP call. Here I am pointing it to etc password file. Or here you can put any other file, maybe etc hostname, etc shadow, whatever. And if that's reflecting in our let's say response, then that means we can access those files. So here I have an example to show you. So let's open them. So I'm using burp intruder, burp suite community edition, and it's free, so you can use it. So first of all, go to proxy, and open browser here. Okay, so what I have made here is uh, so once the interceptor is on, you can see the request will not be successful, as in it's up to us whether we want to forward or not. So I'll say forward, and see. Yeah, so it's on. So I'll just turn it off first and just try to see. If I search for anything, it just return me result. If I search for any, let's say some word which is not there, that means it's reflecting me. So that's the first clue that okay, if I try to pass something, they are reflecting me. Like I said, that you may have to check it deeply, what they are reflecting, how they are using XML, so all that thing. So here this is just for demonstration purpose. So I go back, I turn on the intercept, I try to search anything again, and then here you can see we have some kind of payload. uh, you can see they are passing XML through one of the search parameter, and that is like query search term, anything search term query. So what I'm going to do is I have some payload. So I have this first payload in which you can see I have created a general entity. This general entity is pointing to some file, some sort of file which is inside the etc folder named secret, and then we have query search term. This structure I'm passing same, but I have also added the doc type declaration in which I have added the entity, general entity, and then I am referring to the entity via &xxe. So let's pass this. Okay, let's go back to. So the one of the benefit is that I can change the payload if the request is going. So I'll just change it here, Control V, and I'll say apply changes. And if I forward it, you'll see they have reflected whatever the content of that file is. Now let's do one more thing. Let's do another search, and this time we try to access the etc password file. So this application is on the Docker. So we'll try to see etc password file on that Docker container. So if I search and I'll just highlight the payload again, which is, so they're passing the simple XML structure. I'll change it with the my XML, which has the doc type declaration as a general entity declaration. So I will change the file that I want to access. I want to access the password file. So if I click on forward, you can see I am able to access the etc password file. So that's the way I can access important files. I'll talk about this a little bit more, but let's go back to, okay. So yeah, so for first in first XXE exploit, we were able to access the important file on the system. Um, in the second way, I don't have demo for this one, but it's like, okay, once we know that first of all, there is a front end system, there's a back end system, and then there is some internal servers to which there's the user cannot access those servers. Only backend as a trusted entity, yes, they can access those servers. So let's say once we know that front end can, backend has some kind of XML vulnerability. That means if we create some kind of XML payload, and now in general entity, when we declare general entity, like here we pass the URI etc password, we can also mention some kind of HTTP call, and whatever the HTTP call response will, it will also reflect in the response. That means if if that means we can make a XXE exploit which can call to those admin server or any internal servers which we were not able to access, and then maybe we can access some kind of data from that. Let's say there is some MongoDB server, some Solar server, some kind of open source software that they're using. Then we make HTTP calls to those servers and control those servers as well. Uh, Here etc hostname file also comes handy. Let's say first of all we can check etc. I have never exploited any system, but what I can understand that through front end we can check etc hostname file of this backend system, and then we got to know that, okay, these are the internal servers which are available to backend system, and then from there we can call further servers. So this is what this same side request forgery request is. That these servers which are not accessible to us, but through the XXE exploit we can make requests to those servers as well. One of the exploit, as you can see here, is that when I'm doing the doc type declaration, I have created a general entity and I pass the URL of important endpoint. So I've saw some example of EC2 meta point, EC2 endpoints, which give, these are endpoints for giving the metadata, some kind of secret. So if we understand those system or any sort of system, so we can make those calls, and if it's not reflecting, then maybe we can just pass on the HTTP call and see if something changes. Otherwise we can just if it's reflecting a response, then we can also check that, okay, whether whatever the request that we did, whether it's successful or not. Last, in my case, I would say that what if there is well, you have created your XXE payload, and let's say you want to access the etc hostname file to further see what kind of servers are reachable from that backend server, but the etc hostname file is only be available in case if the website is reflecting your response. So for this one I have another, so I'll just go ahead. I have created, which is search to, and if here I search for anything, let's say they don't reflect it, whether they won't reflect my whatever I'm passing, whatever the user is passing. So in that case, so let's say in that case, if we want to, first of all we need to check whether, so that means we don't know whether if the system has XXE or not, whether the system is vulnerable to XXE or not. In that case, what we can do, we can use another technique. What was the name of that? Data out of band technique, which is basically we try to write data to some kind of another server which is controlled by the attacker. So in that case, what will happen is, so here one of the payload that they have, I have picked up from the Portswigger. So they have created the entity. So this is the doc type DTD that will be there on the attacker server. So and we will refer to this one by using, let's go to the XXE part 1. Okay, so I guess in the last video I've shown that okay, in the doc type declaration we can pass what kind of element general entry all the in the doc type, but we can also create an external DTD. So this external DTD will be a long whatever we need, we can put in that file. So the same case is here. If I go back to XSE bar 2, in this one they have created the entity file. This is pointing to the file called etc password. They created another entity which contains another entity. Actually, I'm not sure why they're putting another entity, but that's how the payload is. Uh, and they are trying to, so basically http webattacker.com, this is the URL controlled by the attacker, and then they're passing through the parameter. So percentage file is pointing to this file, and whatever the data it will be appended to this URL, and then this will write in the, let's say, attacker log servers. So I have one. Mm, so here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to search. First of all, I'm going to turn on the proxy, and I'm going to search for, let's say, anything. I'll just search, and now I have the payload here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the one payload that I have. Which one? Entity. I'm hoping this will work. So let's first understand what we have here. So this is just the internal IP of my of whatever the collab server that I am running. So in this case, there will be some sort of URL, or whatever the attacker service has domain, and this is the sample.dtd where this system is, and hmm, let's try this first. Apply changes. Okay, so there's some kind of because like I said that I have changed the payload and there's some kind of server side exception. But now let's go back to the, so this is the file. Okay, back. So there was some issue. I'll talk about that issue. So as you can see, so last I have told that okay, so there is some DTD that you can host on your server, which is basically attacker server, and then when you pass a payload, what you can do, you can create a doc type declaration, and inside the doc type declaration you can create entity which will basically refer to that DTD file. Or you can directly also, I'm not sure why they have created another entity. Anyways, this is the payload. You can also try to create a doc type declaration and try to put the uh, the doc type DTD declaration in that as well and see if it's working. Anyways, so basically in the DT that I have hosted on my attacker server, basically that has that, okay, it was pointing to etc password file, and then they are trying to append that file to this URL. So the problem is some of the parser, when they try to access this URL which has the content of file which is etc password, it will fail because the file has new line character. So the same thing that they have discussed on the port figure as well, that in case if you're trying to write a file on the let's say on attacker server which has a new line, then it will fail because mostly because the whatever the URL will, the language will try, let's say Java will use some URI library to parse that, and if in case if it has some kind of special character like new line, it will fail. So so then in the new the payload, what I have changed is that I am not pointing to etc password file. Instead I'm pointing to the /etc/secret file. So let's take a look at that. So let's say if this is a server, I go back to my search system and just forward the request. So I'm here again, I'll try to search anything. I search and it and what I'm going to do, I'm going to just change the payload. So I'm going to change it, I'm going to apply it, and I'm going to forward it. So obviously there's some kind of server side exception, but what we're going to check is we're going to check whether it has reflected on our server or not. As you can see that that they have wrote the content of file here in the and appended to your URL, because etc a password file has new line and obviously that URL has failed. That's why. So yeah, so if that's the problem, then you can access those files which it does not has new line character. Anyways, that's for the XXC part 2. uh, so I so in case if you don't understand, I also add a Portsugar URL where you can better understand. In part 3 we talk about XXC in the open source of softwares and how we can prevent it. Thank you for watching.